Welcome back to the Buddhist Psychology Podcast. I'm Lisa Dale Miller. Welcome to 2025, a year that unfortunately promises to be anything but boring, with the impending return of Trump's unintelligible belligerent chaos. 2.0 probably means double the trouble and a whole lot less goodness. So I thought it might be useful to discuss what role cultivation of goodness should play in psychotherapy. The Greek philosopher Aristotle placed great emphasis on the role of virtue in achieving the human goodness he considered central to living a happy life. For Aristotle, eudaimonia, the human flourishing that comes from goodness and its virtuous activities, was a sufficient goal for human life. Buddhist psychology agrees that fulfilling the fundamental human desire for happiness depends on the actualization of human goodness. But it goes one step further by determining that innate goodness has always been our true nature. The Buddha was adamant that although goodness is our birthright, embodying goodness requires intentional, virtuous striving. That is why Buddhist psychology maintains the centrality of virtue and goodness for sustainable psychological well-being. During the early part of the 20th century, analytical and behavioral psychology de-emphasized virtue and morality in its study of the personality. That bolstered Western psychology's existing tendency to favor individualism and contributed to its somewhat ambivalent relationship with morality. Some might even say its moral neutrality with respect to the decent or indecent actions of patients. Thankfully, 21st century Western psychology has evolved and supports research on interventions for increasing human goodness. One avenue pertinent to Buddhist psychology is clinical research focusing on whether mindfulness-based and compassion-based group interventions increase positive psychosocial emotions. Here's two examples of these studies. A 2013 research study measured the effectiveness of an 8-week mindfulness class and an 8-week compassion meditation class on goodness and moral decision-making. Upon completion of one of those two classes, each participant would return to the lab for cognitive testing. The designated waiting area at the lab had 3 chairs, 2 of which, when the patient entered the room, were occupied by female associates of the research group. The participant didn't know them. Another associate of the lab would then enter the waiting room on crutches. Seeing no empty chairs, the person on crutches would then wince and lean against a wall. So to assess compassionate responding, the researchers observed whether the study participant would offer their seat to the associate on crutches. If 2 minutes passed and the participant had not given up their seat, the trial was ended and coded as a non-helping response. The meditation group participants were 5 times more likely to offer their seats to the sufferer than people in the study who had merely been waitlisted and hadn't done either of the 8-week interventions. Interestingly, the enhanced compassionate response was equivalent for the mindfulness and compassion protocols in that study. A 2021 study showed differing effects. 277 participants completed an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program, and 154 participants completed an 8-week compassion cultivation training. Both interventions yielded increased mindfulness, increased decentering, increased body awareness, and increased self-compassion. But improvement in present moment awareness was significantly larger in the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. The compassion cultivation group showed significantly larger increases in feelings of common humanity and empathic concern. So It's clear that offering patients meditative practices for cultivating awareness, ego decentering, and increased compassion works to help them feel more connected and willing to enact human goodness. How long that effect lasts is not something any of the research studies have shown. But what we can say for sure is that the desire to be good is not a value-free proposition. Aligning oneself with wholesome action and moral agency requires sustained intention and effort. Now, it's really important not to mistake any of this for a neurotic need to always be and do what one thinks others want. That kind of trying to be good arises only from distorted self-narratives and neurotic ruminations of self-loathing and self-doubt. Hating oneself is anathema to moral agency and virtuous conduct. So now we can ask ourselves an important question. Since mental health professionals admit that cognitive, affective flexibility and resilience are critical for psychosocial healing, why wouldn't they offer skills to help patients connect with values and virtues that foster patience, willingness, restraint, thoughtfulness, tolerance, curiosity, and openness? That list is human goodness in a nutshell. It seems clear psychotherapy should include such cultivation skills. And if so, what role should psychotherapy play in the cultivation of a person's desire to connect with and enact goodness? Of course, it's not my place to insist that clinicians look within and question how willingly they reflect goodness to their patients. But I do think everyone in the therapy room would be better served if the meta conversation about what is a good life or a good person takes place openly and honestly. Try to imagine working with a patient on a relationship problem. They seem able to describe where the other party is failing, but less forthcoming about how they may be contributing to the discord. Because this is such a common blind spot, many techniques and modalities exist to foster better insight. Yet I've found that increasing awareness isn't enough, and delivering communication skills without imparting a meaningful framework for wise, compassionate conflict resolution doesn't work either. So being good is not just a matter of competence. It is the precious desire to seek the welfare and well-being of all beings, including ourselves, as best we are able. Communicating that requires discussion of how a person conceives of and would implement human goodness, particularly in a less than ideal circumstance, which is when it is most needed. You may have already guessed from the last 2 episodes of this podcast that equalness and compassion cultivation meditation plays a central role in increasing compassionate regard for all beings, even for those who behave badly. But I admit most therapists may not be interested or even willing to learn how to deliver those skills. So in service to helping any therapist discuss human goodness, here is a list of questions a therapist can ask a patient, which can make that dialectic a rich, transformative experience. Question 1. When I say the phrase human goodness, what shows up for you? And just feel how that question lands with you. Imagine someone asking that of you. Question 2. How would you describe what makes a person good? Question 3. Do you have people like this in your current life? How about when you were a child? Question 4. If not, and some people will say, I don't have anyone like that in my life. If not, how about out in the world? Do you have role models? People you don't know personally, but they embody goodness for you. Question 5. What values do these people embody that you think gives rise to goodness? Question 6. Which of these values do you relate to and why? Question 7. When do you notice these values show up in your thoughts and actions in your daily life? Question 8. When is it hard for you to connect with goodness or be good? Question 9. What can you do to help yourself enact goodness even when it feels difficult to do so? And then question 10 is a way to summarize all of the information that has come from the previous 9 questions. So question 10 is, how about if you come up with a list of virtues and values that you hold dear, particularly ones that facilitate goodness? The dialogue from those questions should yield a whole lot of information about where the patient stands regarding human goodness. And be prepared to be surprised about how much their prior life experiences, their political and religious beliefs will inform their stance on goodness. What you may find out is it may be really different than your beliefs or your stance around human goodness. And that becomes a very rich experience for a psychotherapist to navigate working with someone who's not aligned with you. But no matter the starting point, it will be clear what goodness cultivation skills will be beneficial to help the person increase their health and well-being. These skills are much more beneficial if you already have a good sense of what they already have in terms of virtues and values and what they may be lacking or even unaware of. I know it sounds strange. I've had these conversations with patients many, many times over the years about virtue and about values. And it's a black box for a lot of people. They've never thought about it. They don't really consider it something important. And it's so rich to see people evolve when they start to look at these kinds of deeper underlying structures and motivations for the choices every human being makes in their life. So this is the material that I'm offering in this episode today, and I look forward to any kind of questions, comments that you would like to share, and you can do that through my Substack Integrative Psychotherapy portal. Another resource that might really be beneficial in terms of the material in this episode are 2 Dharma talks that I gave in 2021 comparing kindness and niceness. And you can find the recordings of those Dharma talks on the Groundless Ground podcast. I included it as an episode in September of 2021, and I will have a link to that episode in the show notes. So I wish you all the best for the coming year.